You need to avoid these 3 investments in your IRA. This is Adam Bergman, tax attorney and founder of IRA Financial. So you've probably heard about self-directed retirement accounts, using your retirement account to make alternative asset investments. You've also probably heard from some people say, hey, it's so complex. You got to be so careful about the rules because the rules are really complicated and you can get into a lot of trouble. Well, as a tax attorney, someone that's been in the self-directed retirement world 12 plus years, I'm going to tell you that's not true. The rules are actually so easy. There's only 3 things you can't do with an IRA. That's it. 3, not 100, not 40, 3. The first, can't buy life insurance with an IRA. Is that hard? Just don't buy life insurance with an IRA. Not that complicated. Number 2, you can't buy collectibles. Internal Revenue Code section 408M essentially says you're not allowed to buy a collectible with your IRA, like art or rugs, antique cars, baseball cards, comic books. Can't do it. There's a special carve out for IRS approved bullion metals, gold, silver, palladium, and also American Eagles, state minted coins, or bullion coins. So you can buy those with your IRA. They are not deemed collectibles, so they are permitted, but you need to make sure that you hold those IRS approved bullion metals or coins at a depository. You cannot hold them personally. So just remember that. Okay, and then the third category, which is probably the broadest and is found under Internal Revenue Code section 4975, says this. You can't do anything in your IRA that in any way, directly or indirectly, personally, involves or benefits you as the IRA owner, your lineal descendants, or any entities you control. And let's spend some time on 4975 because it's the broadest category. And this is really the only way that the IRS will attack a IRA transaction. Because again, life insurance, you either own or you don't own life insurance. Collectibles, either own or don't own collectibles. Not super complicated. NFTs, non-fungible tokens, that's an area that the IRS hasn't offered any guidance on. So we're unclear whether they're going to define that as a collectible, although I personally believe they will. So now let's move to 4975. So 4975 is clear. You can't earn compensation from an IRA investment. Okay. You cannot provide services to your IRA. You're not allowed to personally guarantee an obligation of your IRA. And then it goes into a number of self-dealing and conflict of interest transactions. So to keep everything simple, concise, and crystal clear, remember just this. When you do an IRA investment, it needs to be done exclusively to benefit your IRA. If you keep that in mind, you're going to be fine. So if you buy Tesla stock with your IRA and it goes up, you're not any richer. Your IRA is richer. That's okay. But Adam Bergman is not richer if my IRA bought Tesla at 100 and now it's at 1,000. The money's in my IRA. Adam Bergman's not $1 personally richer. I would be richer if I took a distribution, but we're looking at the picture of the asset in the IRA. Just like if I bought Bitcoin in my IRA at 10,000 and now it's at 65,000, all the value is in my IRA. Adam Bergman's not $1 richer personally. So when you make investments, it needs to be done exclusively to benefit your IRA. So let's go into a couple of more gray area, more, I would say, complex scenarios that involves partnering with your IRA to really think about what the IRS can do. So there's a case, and I always give this example because it's a really good case that shows where the IRS is coming out on prohibited transactions. And it's called Rollins v. Commissioner, 2004 tax court case. This guy, Mr. Rollins, was an accountant. He owned a number of companies, all under 50%. Remember, 50% is that threshold. Once you're over 50%, that transaction's automatically on its face prohibited. So he owned less than 50%. and he took his 401k and he lent those companies money. And the facts in the case suggested that the companies needed the money, so they were in financial difficulty. So he lent the company monies at prevailing interest rates, and the IRS argued prohibited transaction. And what did he say? His lawyer said, hey, it's under 50%, so under 49.75, it seems good. It's not a disqualified entity. What's wrong? And the IRS said, well, you lent the money to the company to help yourself out personally because you own stock in that company personally. So the loan wasn't done to help your IRA or 401k get the benefit. It was done to help you and maintain your personal investment so the company doesn't maybe go bankrupt. And the tax court agreed and said, listen, Rollins, just because your 401k also benefited from the investment because the interest went back to the 401k, it's not enough. It needs to exclusively 100% be the sole benefactor of the IRA investment. And here, you also benefited because the company's got the money it needed to potentially keep operating. So it's a good example, I think, to show you what the IRS is going at. So if you look at 49.75 on its face, number one, you got to be under 50%. So if you're investing in an entity, you want to make sure that your personal ownership and the ownership of a disqualified person, a lineal descendant, is less than 50%. And you would make that calculation in the aggregate, aggregating all the disqualified people. So that's the first thing. Make sure there's under the 50%. And then if you are under the 50%, even if you own 15 or 20%, you need to make sure that there's no potential conflict of interest, self-dealing. Are you making the investment to personally help yourself? Is your new employer saying, hey, Adam, you want the job? Make an investment. That'd be a conflict of interest, right? Because the investment would be made to help me get a job. It would not be made just to help my IRA. So that would be a problem. Let's look at the Peter Thiel example. I keep going back to this. The IRS looked at this. He invested in PayPal as an early founder, and clearly he'd have to be under 50%, right? Because if he was over 50% of PayPal, he couldn't make an IRA investment into it because that would be prohibited. So even if it was under 50%, now could the IRS make the argument that it was self-dealing? They probably tried because he was under audit. They probably weren't successful because he only invested $1,200. Hard to argue that PayPal needed $1,200 to start operation. So once you're under the 50% threshold, the only other way the IRS can attack a startup, small business, private equity, hedge fund type investment is through valuation. Did you pay value, fair market value for that equity? Okay. So if you are looking to use your retirement funds to invest in startup shares or invest in a hedge fund that you have some involvement in, definitely need to be under 50%. And you also need to make sure you're paying fair market value for that stock. So clearly on a startup, it's easier to make the argument that the shares are worth maybe par, a penny or a dollar. If the business has been in operations 2 years with revenues, profits, goodwill, you want to be super careful about somehow shifting the value of that shares into a Roth IRA, specifically if they're undervalued. The IRS has issued a listed transaction for those types of scenarios, so you need to be super careful about that. The last area I want to talk about is real estate. I get these questions a lot. Partnering your IRA personally with your retirement account, do a real estate deal. Always a little risky. Anytime there's some commingling of funds with a disqualified person, whether it's you or a lineal descendant, and your IRA, got to be careful. You open the window up just enough for a potential attack. Not to say that the IRS will attack you, but if they do, you will have to defend your transaction. The burden of proof is on you as the taxpayer to show that your IRA made the investment to 100% exclusively benefit the IRA. So if you're looking to do a deal, you have 100 grand personally, and you need 100 grand to get the property, and you take it from your IRA. So you have 100 grand from your IRA and 100K personally. Okay. Be careful. There's a case, Kellerman, Henry Kellerman. It was a bankruptcy case. And in this case, the Kellerman family did a joint venture between their IRA and themselves personally. And the bankruptcy court deemed it to be prohibited. So you got to be super careful. And there's no right or wrong. There's no percentages that is the magic number. It's really based off the facts and circumstances. Can you show you could have made the investment with sources outside of your personal funds? And these are the questions and the answers that you need to think about, because you should essentially, before making this investment, think to yourself, okay, if the IRS knocks on my door, how can I prove that the investment the IRA did was done to exclusively 100% benefit the IRA? And if you have any doubt, don't do it, right? What happens if you do a prohibited transaction? Your IRA is deemed disqualified the date the investment occurs, subject to tax and penalties that can travel as high as 15, even higher. So be super careful. You don't want to engage in a prohibited transaction. 4975 is not complex, but if there is going to be a situation where there's commingling of funds between your IRA and yourself personally, or a disqualified person, you want to talk to a tax advisor. You want to make sure you fully understand the facts and circumstances, and you want to be able to show 100% that the investment the IRA made was to wholly benefit the IRA and not in any way personally benefit you. If you're doing founder stock, small business stock, remember, you got to be under the 50% threshold. And please, please remember, you got to be able to show you are paying fair market value for those shares. That's the only two ways the IRS will be able to attack a transaction into private stock. Under 50% fair market value. Otherwise, you can pretty much do anything you want. Cryptos, gold, real estate, hard money loans, investment funds. There's so many cool things you can do. Just remember those three things: life insurance, collectibles, self-dealing, conflict of interest. Stay away from it. You're going to have no problems. And guess what? You can have so much fun with self-directed investments. I love it. Yeah, smart people do self-direct. If you want to learn more about the Roth Solo 401k and are interested in potentially looking at that as an option for your retirement and also potential investments, give our experts at IRA Financial a call. I've personally written 8 books on self-directed retirement plans. We have an amazing team of 401k and IRA experts that can help you customize a plan and obviously help you navigate all of the IRS rules so you can maximize your retirement and tax benefits.